The late 1980s and early 1990s were simply a great time to be a baseball fan. These were the glory days of baseball cards, back when the industry was bigger than ever. For a brief period of time, you could watch tons of baseball on television, provided that you had cable and enough time. And of course, you had some of the most famous and legendary baseball video games of all time. Now, what you have to realize is that the NES was the system for baseball games. Sure, it didn't have any of those mega series with the yearly updates like MLB The Show, but there was a bigger variety of baseball games. I'm talking about different types of games for the NES than for any other system. And all of this was because the Famicom was the ultimate baseball video game system. The Famicom was never really designed to be a baseball-centric video game system, but that's what it became. Starting with Famista in 1986, there was a huge boom in developing baseball games for the Famicom. There are tons of Famicom baseball games, some of which were never released in North America. And some of these games are better than others. So as this channel moves forward, I'm going to end up going through all of those Famicom games one by one, and I'll create reviews for you guys to enjoy. I've already created a couple so far. Maybe we'll go back and review some of those games again, I don't know. For now though, it really is time to focus on the games that did come out in North America. There were 21 baseball games in all that came out for the NES. This includes licensed and unlicensed cartridges. If I forgot something, let me know and I'll do something for you, I don't know. Now, some of these games are better than others. As you know, some of these games are extremely good, so good that they rival some of the best games that the NES has to offer. Other games are a little bit less memorable. Strike! But how do these games stack up against each other? Well, let's dive right in and find out. Now, I'm going to divide this video up into 3 general sections. You'll see at the bottom and the way that YouTube does the chapters and stuff like that. You see, there are 5 NES baseball games that are really bad. I mean, they're so bad that they belong in a category of their own. There are also 5 NES baseball games that are so good that they clearly stand out above the rest. Everybody else basically fits into the middle. So we're going to just jump straight into the worst baseball games of the NES, starting with my game number 21. And this game really should be no surprise to any of you. Alright, game number 21 in last place is Quattro Sports Baseball Pros, and this should be no surprise to any of you. As you probably remember, Quattro Sports was a 4-in-1 unlicensed cartridge created by a company called Camerica, which imported games made by the British company Codemasters. This cartridge featured 4 really crappy sports games, and believe it or not, Baseball Pros is the best of the 4. This is also one of those cartridges that can zap your NES if you're not careful because of the shock that it uses to defeat the NES 10 lockout chip. Not only does this game totally royally suck, but it can also really damage your hardware. It's a sort of unlicensed slop that never really should have existed in the first place. But they came out with it, and so of course I had to play it. The one good thing about this game is that you get some really cool team names. Everything else about this game is simply awful. This has got to be one of the worst baseball games ever programmed, and it is even worse than you think it is. Now, there are 3 features of a baseball video game that is really, really important, right? You got to be able to hit the ball, you got to have good pitching control so you can actually control what you do, and above all, you need a fielding system that doesn't suck because you're going to spend most of your time fielding. Impressively, Baseball Pros manages to fail on all 3 counts. Hitting in this game is a nightmare since the controls are so delayed. It is really hard to time your swing right. You have to swing about a full second before you see your player swing on screen. This really is a problem, and it doesn't get any better no matter how long you play the game. When you do make contact, the ball basically goes somewhere at random. There's no rhyme or reason to it. And pitching is like somehow even worse in this game. It's actually kind of funny. Try to throw a curveball and you'll watch as the ball curves erratically. This seriously has the worst pitching controls that I have ever seen. You will wind up throwing the ball down the middle all the time out of frustration. And the most frustrating part is that you will give up tons of these pop fly home runs. It just feels so cheap. But in Baseball Pros, the worst thing of all is the fielding mechanics. The problem here is that you can only control one fielder at a time. You're only given control over the fielder closest to the ball at the very last second, which means that you'll give up a lot of ridiculous base hits. And it is impossible to catch a pop fly anyways, since the shadow doesn't tell you where the ball is going to land. This is by far the worst fielding system in the history of baseball. Oh, and the computer manager is also completely broken too, I should mention that. The computer will change pitchers at the beginning of every single inning. It will continue to try this even when it is out of pitchers, which is hilarious. The computer is also in love with trying to steal home when it has a runner on third base. Now this might look funny at first, but it's really frustrating when you're just trying to get through a single game of this garbage. Quattro Sports Baseball Pros is easily the worst baseball game on the NES, and that's a pretty impressive statement considering just how bad the next game on the list is. You guys already know which game I'm talking about. Don't let the box fool you. Major League Baseball by LJN is one of the worst baseball games of all time. Yes, this game did have the official Major League Baseball license, and yeah, it's still absolutely awful. The story is that Famista by Namco was a huge hit when it was released in Japan in December 1986. Namco had a working arrangement with Atari Games, which wound up making NES games under the label Tengen. And so Famista officially came to the United States as Versus RBI Baseball. This was an arcade game that ran on NES hardware. So LJN really wanted a piece of that action, but LJN decided not to make a deal with Atari Games, which is the obvious thing to do. Instead, LJN made a deal with Major League Baseball to get the official license, and then it commissioned a company to make a clone of Famista, and the result is one of the worst baseball video games in video game history. Pitching in this game is really bad. You can throw curveballs, but you cannot throw fastballs that curve. Hitting is almost impossible, especially at the beginning of the game when the pitchers can still throw heat. However, as the game drags on, the pitchers will start throwing these slow balls, which makes hitting way too easy. And the other thing you'll notice after a little while is that the computer is incapable of throwing a curveball. So this is the only NES baseball game where the computer throws every single pitch right down the middle without fail, and I'm including Quattro Sports Baseball Pros when I say that. It makes this game even crappier than it seems at first glance. It's common to see home runs like this one, and any game you play will have a really inflated score. The other problem you'll notice is that the ball simply stops in the middle of the outfield for some stupid reason. This can lead to some pretty ridiculous scenarios, things that just simply don't happen in other baseball games. Now, this is the only game on the NES to have that full Major League Baseball license. It also has entries for every player on every team, but you'll soon learn that it doesn't really matter who you have in your lineup. I mean, it is cool to be able to choose from every team in the major leagues, sure. But the problem is that you've got to come up with your own lineups on the fly, and this is extremely tedious. In the end, it doesn't really matter who plays where. You will likely beat the computer by 15 runs or more your first time playing it. It's that kind of game. Of course, that's assuming that you can actually last through an entire game of this. It takes about 40 minutes to play a complete game of Major League Baseball. It's maybe even longer if you play seriously and you don't make silly outs just to speed the game up. It's utter garbage. It's a totally horrible game, and you really should feel bad if you want to defend this game. You know who you are. Anyway, the next game is another LJN game, and it's almost just as bad as that one. Roger Clemens MVP Baseball is another LJN game, and this is honestly a game that never should have been released. The nice thing is that this is one of the few games to offer a realistic schedule. The problem is that you won't want to play the game for more than 5 minutes. Now, I say that this game should never have been released because it really feels like a beta. It feels like somebody put together some sort of proof of concept and then they accidentally released it. It just feels like the game was not finished at all, and it really is a pain to play. Just like other really crappy baseball games, it's almost impossible to get the timing right when you're hitting. I guess the nice thing is that you can blow fastballs by the other team when you're pitching. The strike zone is really hard to figure out though, and this can really drive you nuts regardless of whether you're pitching or hitting. But the worst part of this game by far is the fielding, and man, they really screwed up the fielding. The game changes camera angles once the ball is hit, and it's almost impossible to field infield grounders as a result. Plus, the throwing controls change depending on which fielder has the ball, which makes this game an absolute mess. Add in the fact that you've got to lay down the tag in time if you've got a close play, and you've got a fielding recipe for disaster. I mean, this guy was out. This game is a fielding nightmare, and yeah, that's right, I'm losing 32-1, thank you very much. It's not that this game is too difficult. Instead, it's that the fielding angles make this game basically impossible to play. Now, those 3 games were really bad, right? But the next game on this list is just as bad. It's impressive that the NES would have so many awful baseball games, and notice that none of these games were released in Japan. Bo Jackson Baseball for the NES would normally be the worst game on any other system, but here it's only almost the worst. The back looks really cool, I know, but do not be fooled. You choose the pitch you want to throw, and then you get this first-person image complete with the umpire screaming, "Strike!" When you're hitting, you're stuck with this crazy close-up image where you have to guess when you can push the A button to swing. Seriously, hitting is a major problem in this game.
Strike! You're out!
When you finally do make contact, it looks like you missed the ball, which doesn't say great things about the hit detection. And this game only gets worse from there. Seriously, I mean, did anybody even bother to playtest these games? Fielding is okay, though the screen is a lot slower than the ball, which is really annoying. You can't see your outfielders at all, which means, of course, that you end up giving up extra base hits like crazy. And if you ever get a close play, you get this ridiculous screen of your manager arguing with the umpire, which means more screaming.
He was safe by a mile! You're out! He was safe! You're out!
Seriously, the only cool part of this game is that Ariel from The Little Mermaid sings the national anthem, and I swear that it's her. This is her outfit. Stay far, far away from Bo Jackson Baseball. Now, the next game on this list kind of pains me to include in the bottom 5, but I really do have to be honest with you guys. I mean, this game really sucks. When you try to play it again, it's just not that much fun, and it sucks because of a major flaw that will become obvious as soon as you play it. Baseball was the first baseball game for the NES made in Japan back in 1983. Don't you just love the classic look of those old black boxes? Now, the story behind this game is that it started off life as a Versus System arcade game, which meant that it ran on Famicom hardware. The original arcade version was cool because you'd get a center field perspective when you were pitching. This game was intended to compete with Sega's Champion Baseball, which is a 1983 arcade game that has largely gone forgotten over the years. Like Champion Baseball, Nintendo's baseball had no fielding controls at all, which is its biggest weakness. Yeah, I know we're talking about like 1983, right? This is like the Stone Age. But it really, really sucks to play a baseball game where you have no fielding control at all. I mean, you want to feel like you're actually making a difference when you play the game, right? This game is just boring, even though I guess it's historically important. Anyway, gameplay is really slow and tedious. It is pretty cool when you manage to hit a home run, though you can see here that the NES graphics are nowhere near as good as the arcade game, even though the hardware is the same. And fielding is basically just waiting for the computer to field the ball and then throwing it over to the correct base. It's really easy and it's really boring. So that's really my issue with this game, the Black Box Baseball game. I mean, it really was a very influential game. It actually was the major influence behind Famistop, believe it or not. Funny thing is, the guy who was in Japan playing baseball who wound up making Famistop was frustrating because he couldn't control his fielders, and so he decided to make his own game. Anyway, the original baseball is just boring. That's its problem. Now, those bottom 5 games are horrible. I think you can make a case that any one of those 5 games is the worst NES baseball game. You could even go as far as making a case for some of these to be the worst NES game, period. Now we go to the middle ground. Now, I think that the bad games here in the middle ground are legitimately bad, but I can honestly tell you that a lot of the other games here are set up in a pretty arbitrary order. And as you will see, there are good arguments you can make for and against a whole bunch of these games. At number 16, I have Cyber Stadium Base Wars, which will probably make you guys upset. This game was technically released by Ultra Games, though that was just another brand name for Konami. My biggest problem with this game is that the baseball aspects are really crappy. In particular, when you go to the fielding mode, the camera simply cannot keep pace with the ball. Now, if you've ever played Base Wars, and I know that you guys have because you keep telling me about what a great game this is, you know that the focus of Base Wars is not just on baseball. It's a game all about like acquiring weapons and defeating the opponent in battle anytime there's a close play or something like that. Except, of course, that part of the game totally sucks. Even if the play isn't close, you'll still get this stupid battle screen. The computer will then spam the same attack over and over again and will beat you 95% of the time. Seriously, the camera system in this game is so bad I don't even know where to begin. And you're forced into these stupid battles way too often, and they're just no fun at all. Now, Konami knew how to combine a good sports game with a good fighting module. That's why I'm surprised that this game sucks so much. Blades of Steel is actually a fun NES game, even if you don't take into consideration the fighting components. Fighting in this game is a lot easier, in large part because the computer does not just spam the same button over and over again to make it impossible for you to do anything. In contrast, I cringe every time I have to have another stupid, pointless battle in Base Wars. It's just not a well-designed game. That's all that there is to it. Now, I've said this before, I know that some of you guys like it, but seriously, you guys need to spend your time playing a game that's actually good, and you need to stop playing crap like Base Wars. Oh, and by the way, Base Wars is yet another crappy NES baseball game that was only released in North America and never went to Japan. There's a reason why. The North American exclusive games all totally suck. But that doesn't mean that Japan didn't also have its share of slop tier NES games. You know what? Do me a favor and just never touch Bases Loaded 3. At first glance, this game looks like just the other Bases Loaded games. Hitting totally sucks, sure, but you can get used to it after a little while. Yeah, but just wait until you start playing with the fielding. Pitching in this game isn't bad. But the fielding is horrible. You can't see your player until literally the last second. And there's no radar system to help you figure out where your guys are. At least it has predictable fielding controls, unlike that awful Roger Clemens MVP baseball game. But it still sucks. I mean, this game like really sucks. And the sad part is that Bases Loaded 4 really isn't much better. I have this game over Bases Loaded 3 for only one reason, and no, it's not because the box art is good, because that clearly sucks. No, it's because they made the fielding marginally better. In this game, you have these O's on the radar screen that show you where your fielders are. Now, the fielding in this game is still absolutely horrendous, don't get me wrong. Just figuring out what direction you're supposed to push is a horrible experience. But hey, at least it's better than Bases Loaded 3. So that's just about all I can say about those two abominations. I really think that you have to say that 4 is better than 3 because it's got that radar system, but it's still just marginally better. And yet the Japanese versions of those games were just as bad, but I'll have a little bit more to say about those in later videos. Now, at this point in the list, we're going to start getting to some games that are actually pretty good, so you'll notice that my mood will change a little bit. But this next game really gets on my nerves, mostly because I owned it when I was a kid. Legends of the Diamond was actually a pretty good idea, it was just poorly implemented. The box has this really cool gold color, but there's strange stuff already, like why does the heading say game description? The end label has one of the most hilarious misspellings in NES history. And no, this game is not worth more because there was that spelling error. Bandai didn't bother to ever correct it, and they printed millions of these games, right? This game has some good elements, but it's really mediocre, especially compared to the games above it on this list. So the cool thing is that you can choose a roster from the best players in baseball history. You can have Ty Cobb as your leadoff man, which is always cool. But then you have to worry about timing your swing, which is really awkward. The biggest problem in this game is that players like Babe Ruth totally suck. This is especially apparent if you play this game in tournament mode. So you play a tournament against a bunch of teams with players that you've never heard of, and they're far more powerful than like the greatest baseball players of all time? Like what? Anyway, pitching in this game isn't bad, I suppose. The pitching and fielding systems are a lot like good SNK games like Baseball Stars. And hitting isn't too hard, though my biggest problem is that it's hard to hit for power. Instead of getting a hit in a clutch situation, Roberto Clemente hits a weak ground ball to end the inning. I've been playing this game since I was a kid, and I've never been able to beat a single team in the tournament mode. I always get shut out. But there are some really cool aspects of this game that are kind of unique that I do want to show off. You can dive to field balls, which actually looks really cool. There's this funky trick you can do where you throw the ball to yourself, which is a fun way to spend an afternoon. The home run animation in this game is simply awesome. And you can get the batter to charge the mound when he's hit by a pitch. So Babe Ruth trying to kill Whitey Ford is the sort of image that you will never get out of your head. Anyway, Legends of the Diamond really sucks as a one-player game, but if you have more than one player, it's actually a lot of fun. You should give it a try. Now, you guys will be surprised at the games I've got next on this list. Okay, so I've got RBI Baseball 2 at number 12. This is followed by RBI Baseball 3 at number 11. The thing is that both of these are actually the same game. RBI 3 has a few more teams because it has the past division winners. Yeah, that's the only difference between these two games. The games themselves play exactly the same. The music's a little bit different, but that's the only difference. The games are also exactly the same as the original RBI Baseball. This means that all of those cheap tricks from the original RBI Baseball will still work here. The reason I have these games listed so low is because the graphics look really ugly and because things like jumping and diving can actually get in your way. Honestly, Tengen should have just kept the graphics from the original instead of giving us these ugly looking players. So I'll talk more about the original RBI Baseball in a second. Anyway, I know that some of you guys are going to be upset to see these games ranked so low, but I really can't stand what they did with the graphics. Now, the next game on this list is going to be even more controversial. Number 10 is Baseball Stars 2. I know what you're thinking. You're wondering how the sequel to one of the best NES games of all time can rank so low. The problem with Baseball Stars 2 is that all of the fun of the original is gone. You can't customize the name of your team. You can't even change the name of your players, even if they're newly signed rookies. I know this game was not made by SNK, it was made by Romstar, and it's yet another North America only release. Remember what I just said? All the North America only games are awful. But seriously, all the good parts of Baseball Stars were taken out and they were replaced with nothing. The game is the same as Baseball Stars, except that the animations seem to be a bit slower. Certain things like computer fielding bugs were never really fixed in this game either. In fact, it feels like a stripped down version of Baseball Stars more than an actual improvement. And if you push down when you swing, your player bunts. It's the only NES baseball game that's like this. So I know most of those are really petty and small complaints, sure, and there's a chance that I've been maybe a little bit too harsh in this game, but when I play this game, I just don't have fun. This is a clear drop-off from the original Baseball Stars, and I really do not recommend this game. Don't play it. Number 9 is Tecmo Baseball. Now, Tecmo Baseball is an overlooked game, though it's not quite good enough to be a classic. It's got a pretty random assortment of 14 teams that are supposed to represent major league teams, I guess. One of those things you'll realize after a while is that none of these games have the actual Major League Baseball license or the actual team names. It's only the crappy LJN game that has that. It's crazy. The worst licensed NES baseball game, licensed as in licensed by Nintendo, just so happens to be the only one that has that Major League Baseball logo on it. It just boggles my mind. Anyway, hitting is difficult because of that behind the pitcher batting view. It's kind of like Bases Loaded, except it's a little bit faster and it really takes some time to get used to. Having said that, this is actually a good game and it has better challenge than most other NES baseball games. Chances are that any game of Tecmo Baseball you play against the computer will be low scoring and pretty dramatic. Oh, and this home run animation basically comes straight from Bases Loaded, which I find to be totally hilarious. I guess you could put this game higher on the list, but I just couldn't figure out a way to put a Bases Loaded clone above Bases Loaded. That's how this game wound up at number 9. And of course that leads me directly to number 8. There are people who will argue that Bases Loaded 2 Second Season is better than the first game. I actually thought about this for quite a while, but I just cannot rank the second game higher than the first. Now, I absolutely love pitching in this game because it's so easy to blow high fastballs right by the hitters. Hitting in this game takes a little bit of getting used to. But hitting is also really easy once you get the hang of it. So I think that hitting has always been the real weakness behind the Bases Loaded series. That behind the pitcher viewpoint is innovative, it's creative, but it can be really hard to learn how to time things just right when you're batting. The other nice thing is that this game is much faster than the first game. My problem though is fielding, which uses this really awkward side angle. That's normally not a problem since you can strike the side out easily once you get used to how pitching works. Still, it can be really disorienting when the computer finally makes contact and you don't know where any of your fielders are. Anyway, Bases Loaded 2 is a solid game, but I've honestly got to rank it below the original. So this brings me to numbers 7 and 6 on this list, and the truth is that we can have a long debate about which one belongs where, so let the debate commence. After putting way too much thought into this, I decided to stick Bases Loaded at number 7. Naturally, this means that RBI Baseball winds up slotting into number 6. Both of these games are classics, and people are going to be upset with me regardless of which one I stick where. And some of you will probably be upset that I don't have RBI Baseball at number 1, but that's because it's not anywhere near as good as my top 5. That's not to say that these games aren't very good. They're actually great and they're tons of fun, especially 2-player. But there are issues with these games that the people who champion them tend to overlook. RBI Baseball is really geared towards home run hitting, especially if you use one of the teams with the big sluggers. The fielding in RBI Baseball, meanwhile, is pretty bad, and this can be really frustrating if you're playing multiplayer. Bases Loaded has better fielding in general, but it's really slow and very buggy. Take this game that I played, for example, where I gave up a dramatic go-ahead home run in the top of the 9th inning. My game froze completely before the guy could cross the plate, and I had to turn the system off. So I don't know, maybe that's a reason to prefer playing Bases Loaded 2, though that game has its own issues with the bugs and with that awful fielding system and other things. Anyway, you could order, a bunch of those games however you want. Both Bases Loaded and RBI Baseball are tons of fun to play to this day. It's just that those games are not quite the amazing, best of all time games that some of the fans of these games think that they are, that's all. And we'll move up now to the top 5 games. Now, I personally think that you can make a good case for any of these 5 games to be the best NES baseball game of all time. Furthermore, at least 3 of these games have a very real argument for being the best baseball video game of all time, period, on any console. So let's dig in. Number 5 has got to be Little League Baseball by SNK. Like the rest of the top 5, this is a direct translation of a Japanese game, though this one is really well done. This is one of those rare NES games with an actual introduction, which lets you know right away that the game is pretty high quality. And the gameplay itself here is just absolutely fantastic. They really did a good job here given the limitation of the NES. You can choose from a number of American and foreign teams, each of which have their own strengths and weaknesses. The game will simulate all computer-controlled Little League World Series games in the background for you. And when you get to the game itself, you'll see that it's got a lot in common with Baseball Stars. So Baseball Stars, Baseball Stars 2, Little League Baseball, and Legends of the Diamond all use that same basic baseball game engine. I'm not sure if there were any other Japanese baseball games that use this engine or not. It's pretty fascinating stuff, and Little League Baseball does a particularly good job with the engine. It's not easy to get base hits in this game, and you'll find yourself excited when something finally sneaks through. Runs are really hard to come by, and you have to be careful and conservative when you run the base paths. And of course, this game features the best home run cutscene out of any NES baseball game. This is a seriously challenging game, and it takes quite a bit of practice to get good enough at it to advance far. And it really is one of my favorite NES games. It's kind of a unique game too. Now there have been more recent Little League World Series games, but they're all garbage. I mean, really, really bad, especially on the Nintendo Switch. That game's horrible. Now this NES game is easily the best of the lot, and it's clearly one of the best NES baseball games, period. That brings me up to number 4, which a lot of you are going to argue really should be number 1. Though most people have forgotten about it, Bad News Baseball is really one of the best baseball games on the NES. The selling point of this game was the fact that you could play as both boys and girls teams, but the game itself is actually a lot better than just that. When you dig into it, you'll discover a game with 12 teams that vaguely resemble real-life Major League Baseball teams. When you play it, you'll discover a bunch of kids playing against each other with rabbits acting as umpires. So there is some logic to using the rabbits if you play the Japanese version, but honestly it doesn't really matter for our purposes here. What matters here is the gameplay, and the gameplay of Bad News Baseball is tremendously good. Pitching is easy to control and it feels natural and fluid. Fielding in general is pretty easy even if you make an error. The nice thing is that your fielders move really quickly and they can rifle the ball in from the outfield. Now, Bad News Baseball is a Tecmo game, but unlike Tecmo Baseball, it's actually got cutscenes, like Tecmo Super Bowl has, Tecmo NBA Basketball, and that really adds to the attractiveness of the game. It's got a lot more character than Tecmo Baseball, and it's really a big thing because Tecmo Baseball honestly is a pretty bland and forgettable game. When you get the hang of hitting, you'll start hitting home runs like these, and you'll see all of the interesting cutscenes that pop up. The game is not particularly hard, and it's a lot of fun to play while you get the hang of how things work. And because the fielders can actually field, you can really get into a lot of trouble for being way too aggressive on the base paths. Now, the best part of this game is that you've got all the girls' teams to explore once you're done playing with the stock teams. It's kind of like you're having 2 different games in one. The girls' teams all have exaggerated stats, and games tend to be more high scoring. It looks like you're actually playing with girls, well, with girl players with major league talent, that is. Anyway, the game overall is a ton of fun, and this is a game that you absolutely need to play if you haven't already. So the thing about these top 5 games is that they basically have no weaknesses. The next game could also be the number 1 game on this list depending on how you look at it. These are games that are so good that it's surprising that none of these series lasted longer than they did. Baseball Simulator 1000 is one of the most incredible baseball video games that I have ever played. Parts of it might feel a little bit dated, but the superpowers are just amazing. You can choose to play with the superpowers turned on, which lets you pitch, hit, or field with a bunch of super abilities. Sometimes they work right and sometimes they miss, and so you have to be strategic about how you use them. So the cool thing about the superpowers is that they add another strategic component to the game, right? You can change the number of super skills that you can use in any given game. When you play a season, you can set up the rules at the beginning of the season. And when there's a limit, it means you have to figure out when to use them to maximize your advantage, right? It's like adding another level of strategy on top of the already present strategy of baseball, and it really is a lot of fun. You can also create teams, edit players, and do a bunch of other things, which is pretty impressive for a relatively old NES game. Seriously though, just messing around with the special moves itself is a ton of fun and is worth giving this game a spin. This game is unique for so many reasons, and I really can't do this game enough justice in this short segment. This is one of those games you really have to try playing to fully understand, and it's a ton of fun even though the computer does some really screwy stuff sometimes. And the other thing is that the NES version of this game is actually better than the Super NES version, but I'm going to talk more about that game in another video sometime in the future. So if you've never played Baseball Simulator for the NES, you really need to give it a try. It's an all-time classic. But number 2 on this list is arguably one of the best games for the NES regardless of genre. This one can really suck you in if you're not careful, even if you're not a fan of the sport. Though it doesn't get much attention or love these days, the truth is that Dusty Diamond's All-Star Softball is an all-time classic. This is a generational game. Believe it or not, not even the back of the box does this game justice, and this game sold largely by word of mouth. You choose a team from a selection of 60 different players, including boys and girls, and all of these players have their own unique capabilities. Different players play differently depending on their positions, and this includes players who have crazy windups like this guy. You get guys who hop in the outfield, guys who are fast, and guys who are slow. And there is a lot of strategy that goes into which players you choose and where you play them. So the combinations in this game are seemingly endless. I mean, you guys who are really good at math, you can go do all of the math for me, right? You got like 10 players a team, you got 60 players and all to choose from, right? People love to argue about which players are the best at which positions and what to do if your opponent chose that guy or this guy or whatever. Anyway, it's a pretty deep game, even though there are only a couple of levels to it. Each of the ball fields you play at have its own characteristics and quirks. You play at 5 different ballparks in the first part of the game. You have to deal with stuff like balls getting stuck behind park benches and some really bizarre inside the park home runs. You also have to deal with strange ground texture, cliffs, and all sorts of other weird things. And if you're not careful in the schoolyard and you break a window, you can have a home run turned into an out, though I guess I was lucky here. Dusty Diamond's All-Star Softball is pretty much the ultimate two-player NES baseball game, even though I guess it's technically a softball game. This game also offers both fast and slow-pitch modes as well, which means that it's one of the most versatile and replayable games on the whole platform. It takes maybe like 4 to 5 hours to play through in single-player mode. Maybe it's a little bit faster if you never lose, but you will want to do it over and over again to get to know the different players and what they're good at and what they're not so good at. If you win at all 5 of the ballparks, you play against the Amazons in an actual stadium. I haven't beaten this team yet, they're pretty hard. It's a lot of fun to try though. Seriously, this game has some of the best replay value out of any NES baseball game, even though I guess it's technically a softball game. And there are a lot of people out there who will call this number 1. Now, I know that you guys already know which game I've got listed here as number 1 because you've been paying attention. I just want to know whether you agree with me on this or not. Well, in my mind, Baseball Stars is the greatest NES baseball game of all time. You can also argue that this is the best NES game, period. While there are many ways you can play this game, the most fun is to start with a team from scratch and gradually build it up. So, Baseball Stars is not really like a baseball management game the way that Out of the Park Baseball is. Instead, this is more like a guided RPG except with baseball elements. Except, of course, that instead of having like the game upgrade your character for you, you get to decide how your character upgrades, which character to upgrade, and you've got, what is it, like 20, 21 different characters to choose from. The game is totally fascinating. When you first play this game, you'll find it difficult, especially if you're legitimately starting your team from scratch. Over time, though, the game becomes gradually easier and your players start to take on their own personalities. This game offers a tremendous playing curve and it becomes really rewarding once you start sticking a whole bunch of hours into it. And unlike a lot of the other games on this list, it's actually really common to play this one for hundreds of hours before you've finally gotten your super team finished. So in that sense, Baseball Stars is really more of an RPG than a traditional baseball game. And it really is a shame that SNK let the Baseball Stars series fall apart the way that it did. So Baseball Stars 2 on the NES at least let you continue to build up your own team, though it took away customizability. You can't even change like the name of your players. It's really stupid. Then the Neo Geo games and the other variations that came out later didn't even let you build your own team. You just chose from some random stock team and all the fun was gone. There was no customizability left. Anyway, that's a big problem. That's what happened in that series. And there you have it. That's how I ranked the 21 NES baseball games. So what do you guys think? What do you disagree with? What do you agree with? Do you think a different game should be number 1? Do you think that the bad games are not really that bad? Let me know down below in the comments.